What happens when a Hollywood superstar sits down for a routine morning show interview, only to be blindsided by a host with a hidden agenda? The tension at the Good Morning America studio was almost tangible. What began as a simple promotional segment for Mark Wahlberg's latest film quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable live TV moments in recent memory. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment, because this story will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about morning shows. Mark Wahlberg walked onto the Good Morning America set that Tuesday, exuding his usual confident stride and flashing that signature Boston smile. Settling into the guest chair across from Michael Strahan, he seemed ready for a routine chat about his upcoming action thriller. The lights were bright, the cameras rolling, everything appeared perfectly normal. Welcome back to Good Morning America. I'm Michael Strahan, and we're here with Mark Wahlberg, Strahan began, his voice carrying that familiar morning show cheer. Thanks for having me, Michael, Wahlberg replied, adjusting his jacket and leaning back comfortably. Always good to be here. But something felt off. Strahan's smile seemed a little too forced, his eyes colder than usual. Viewers at home might have missed it, but Wahlberg immediately sensed the tension beneath the surface. So let's talk about your new movie, Strahan said, glancing down at his notes with a dismissive tilt. Another action film where you play the tough Boston guy. Seems like you've been playing the same character for, 20 years now? The remark hung in the air like a challenge. Wahlberg's jaw tightened, but he stayed composed. Well, I think each role brings something new to the table, he said. This particular character demanded a lot of physical prep and emotional depth I haven't explored before. Emotional depth, Strahan echoed with a barely audible chuckle that the audience couldn't hear, but Wahlberg did. Interesting. Coming from someone who's built a career playing variations of the same angry guy. The production crew exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't in the script. The segment was supposed to be light, promotional, maybe touch on Wahlberg's family, but Strahan was steering it into dangerous territory. I'm not sure what you're trying to do here, Wahlberg said, his Boston accent sharpening as his guard went up. I've done comedies, dramas, action, you name it. My body of work speaks for itself. Does it, though? Strahan leaned in, the fake morning show smile still plastered on his face, even as his words became sharper. Let's be honest. When people see Mark Wahlberg in a movie, they know exactly what they're getting. The same scowl, the same tough guy act, the same limited range. The camera caught the exact moment Wahlberg's expression shifted from puzzled to genuinely irritated. His hands, once resting casually, now gripped the armrests tighter. You know what, Michael? I came here to talk about my film and connect with the audience, Wahlberg said, his voice steady but edged with warning. If this is meant to be some kind of roast, maybe a heads up would have been nice. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered, Strahan replied smoothly, scanning his notes again. Speaking of which, let's discuss your past. You've been open about your troubled youth. Legal troubles. Time in jail. Do you ever worry your criminal history might limit the roles you get offered? The question hit like a sledgehammer. Wahlberg had always been candid about his past, but the phrasing felt intentionally provocative. That's a part of my story I've never hidden, Wahlberg said, controlling his anger. I've been honest about my mistakes to teach young people lessons. I've spent decades trying to make amends and give back to my community. But do you think a convicted felon should really be considered a role model? Strahan pressed, his tone deceptively casual. You assaulted innocent people. That's not exactly what we associate with family-friendly entertainment. The studio went silent. Even the cameramen looked uncomfortable, though the cameras kept rolling. Wahlberg's irritation gave way to raw anger. His jaw clenched visibly. I was a kid who made terrible mistakes, Wahlberg said through gritted teeth. I've apologized. I've made amends where I could. and I've dedicated my life to being better." "What are you trying to accomplish here?" he demanded. "I'm trying to understand how someone with your background became so beloved," Strahan replied, feigning innocence. "Our viewers deserve to know who they're supporting when they buy tickets." "You're being unprofessional," Wahlberg shot back, his temper flaring. "This is about my film, not a character assassination." Strahan shrugged. "I think character is exactly what we should discuss. After all, you're asking people to spend their hard-earned money to watch you. Don't they have the right to know the kind of person you really are?" "What kind of person I really am?" Wahlberg repeated, his voice rising. "You want to know what kind of person I am?" Wahlberg shot back, his voice sharp. "I'm someone who owns his mistakes, works hard every single day, and tries to be a good father and husband. What about you, Michael? What kind of person ambushes a guest on live television?" The tension in the studio was now thick enough to choke on. Production assistants were signaling frantically for Strahan to move on, but he didn't even acknowledge them. His attention was locked onto Wahlberg, as if he had a personal score to settle. "I'm just doing my job," Strahan replied coolly. "Asking tough questions is what journalists do." "Journalists?" Wahlberg let out a harsh laugh. "Is that what you're calling this? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels like a hit job." Strahan's expression hardened. The morning show friendliness was gone, replaced by something sharper, something personal. He leaned back in his chair with a casualness so deliberate, it felt like a provocation. "A hit job?" he repeated mockingly. "Mark, you're awfully defensive for someone who claims to have nothing to hide. I'm asking the questions any responsible journalist would." "Cut the act, Michael," Wahlberg snapped, his Boston accent thickening as his patience thinned. "You know exactly what you're doing. This isn't journalism. This is you trying to make a name for yourself at my expense." "A name for myself?" Strahan laughed, really laughed this time, cold and calculated. His eyes stayed locked on Wahlberg's, studying him like prey. "Mark, I've been on television longer than you've been making movies worth watching. I don't need to use you for anything." The insult hit like a punch. Wahlberg's face flushed red as his grip tightened around the armrests, the leather creaking beneath his hands. "You want to talk about making names?" Wahlberg fired back. "How about how you went from riding the bench in football to riding the coattails of better hosts on this show?" "Riding the bench?" Strahan's voice finally cracked, anger bleeding through. The polished morning show mask was slipping fast. "I was a Super Bowl champion, something you'll never understand since the closest you've come to real athletics is pretending to be tough in movies." "At least I earned my success," Wahlberg shot back. "I didn't get handed a TV job because the network needed to fill a diversity quota." The studio went dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Everyone knew Wahlberg had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Strahan's smile vanished, replaced by a fury so raw, it looked dangerous. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually leap across the table. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice low and lethal. "Did you really just say that?" "You heard me," Wahlberg growled, no longer trying to hide his anger. "You want to question my character and my career? Fine. Let's talk about how you really got here." "You racist piece of garbage," Strahan snarled, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. His voice echoed through the studio, making the crew visibly uncomfortable. "You think a few movies wipe away what you actually are?" "What I really am." Wahlberg stood abruptly, towering over the host, casting a shadow across the table. "I'm someone who worked for everything I have, someone who took responsibility for his mistakes instead of playing victim his whole career." "Playing victim?" Strahan rose to his feet as well, refusing to back down. Now both men stood face to face, the coffee table the only barrier preventing the confrontation from turning physical. "You committed hate crimes, Mark, actual hate crimes, And you think a few blockbuster roles give you the right to talk down to me? I was 16, Wahlberg shouted, his voice shaking the studio. Audience members gasped, hands covering their mouths. I've spent 30 years trying to make up for it. What's your excuse for being a bully right now? What's your excuse for blindsiding a guest on live TV? My excuse, Strahan shot back, pointing across the table, is that people like you think you can buy your way out of accountability. You donate to charity, smile for interviews, and expect everybody to forget who you really are under all that Hollywood polish. And who am I really, Michael? Wahlberg challenged, arms spread wide, daring him. Go ahead. Tell everyone watching. Strahan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You're a violent criminal who got lucky in Hollywood. You're someone who hurt innocent people because of their race, and now expect the world to treat you like a hero just because you can memorize lines and look tough on camera. You know exactly what you are. Wahlberg stepped forward, matching Strahan's low, dangerous tone, but his words carried the weight of barely restrained rage. You're a failed athlete who couldn't cut it when the real competition showed up. And now, you sit behind a desk, throwing stones at people who actually accomplish something meaningful. Failed athlete? Strahan's voice cracked, fury overtaking his composure. I played 14 seasons in the NFL, Wahlberg shot back, his tone rising. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I have a Super Bowl ring. What have you ever done that was real? What have you accomplished that wasn't handed to you by Hollywood executives? Real? Wahlberg laughed harshly, without a hint of humor. You want to talk about real? I built businesses from nothing. I created jobs for real people. I contribute to society instead of sitting here in a comfortable chair, attacking guests who come on your show in good faith. Good faith? Strahan scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. You came here to promote another mindless action movie, playing the same character you always play. Don't pretend you're doing the world some great service. At least I create something, Wahlberg shot back. At least I take risks. What do you create, Michael? What do you build? You just tear people down on TV and call it journalism. I expose frauds, Strahan replied coldly. I ask the questions that need to be asked. I hold people accountable for their actions, especially those who think celebrity status makes them untouchable. Untouchable? Wahlberg's voice rose, his face reddening. I've been more transparent about my past than probably any other actor in Hollywood. I've owned every mistake, apologized to everyone I could, and spent decades trying to be better. What more do you want from me? I want you to admit you don't deserve the platform you have, Strahan said bluntly. I want you to acknowledge that someone with your history shouldn't be considered a role model for kids. I want you to stop pretending that money and fame wash away the blood on your hands. The accusation hung heavy in the studio air. Wahlberg's fists clenched, and for a tense moment, it seemed like this verbal war could turn physical. Security at the edges of the set tensed, ready to intervene. You're out of line, Wahlberg growled through gritted teeth. Way out of line, and you know it. Am I? Strahan challenged, relishing the reaction he'd provoked. Or am I just saying what everyone else is thinking but too polite to voice? You're a criminal, Mark. A violent criminal who hurt people because of their skin color. That's not ancient history. That's who you are. That's enough, Wahlberg exploded, his voice filling the studio with raw fury. Crew members jumped at the sudden volume, and cameras captured every inch of his rage. You want to keep pushing this? Keep attacking me personally? Fine, let's talk about you for a minute. Strahan narrowed his eyes, but stayed aggressive. Go ahead, Mark. Let's hear what the convicted felon has to say about me. You really want to go there? You want to dig into people's personal lives and throw their worst moments in their faces? Wahlberg's voice dropped into a menacing growl. Because I can play that game, too. I'm not the one with a criminal record, Strahan replied smugly. No, but you're the one who abandoned your teammates, Wahlberg countered sharply. You quit when it got tough. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about how you bailed on the Giants when they needed you most. I retired because my body couldn't take it anymore, Strahan said defensively. That's not quitting. That's being smart. Being smart? Wahlberg laughed bitterly. Or being selfish. You left millions of dollars on the table and walked away from your teammates because you couldn't handle the pressure. At least when I messed up, I was a kid. You were a grown man abandoning people counting on you. That's not what happened, and you know it, Strahan snarled, the defensive edge creeping into his voice. Isn't it? Wahlberg pressed, stepping closer. You spent years talking about how much you loved the game, how much your teammates meant to you. And then, when it got hard, you ran. You quit. And now you sit here in a cushy studio job, throwing stones at people who actually stick around when things get tough. I gave everything to that team for 14 years, Strahan protested, anger breaking through. Did you, though? Wahlberg challenged, closing the distance between them. Because from where I stand, it looks like you gave everything. Until it wasn't convenient anymore. At least when I made mistakes, I faced the consequences. You just ran and expected applause for it. You don't know what you're talking about. Strahan shot back, his confidence faltering. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Wahlberg pressed. You've spent your whole television career trying to prove you're more than an ex-athlete. You go after guests like me because you're still trying to convince people you're a real journalist instead of just another pretty face reading a teleprompter. At least I didn't have to buy my way into respectability, Strahan fired back, struggling to regain control. Buy my way? Wahlberg's voice cracked with indignation. I earned every single thing I have. I started with nothing, Wahlberg said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of hard-earned truth. I made terrible mistakes, paid for them, and clawed my way up through pure effort. You got handed a television job because people remembered you for something else. We are not the same. We're exactly the same, Strahan insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. We're both trying to convince people we're something we're not. No, Michael, Wahlberg replied with deadly certainty. We are nothing alike. I own my past. I've apologized for my mistakes and spent decades making amends. You can't even admit that you quit on your team when they needed you most. You can't acknowledge that you got this job because of who you used to be, not because of any talent for journalism. I worked for this position, Strahan protested weakly. Did you? Wahlberg pressed, relentless. Because it looks to me like you walked straight from the football field into a studio without paying any dues. No journalism school, no years working your way up through small markets, no real experience asking tough questions, just a famous name and a smile. Strahan's face flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment. You think you're better than me because you went to jail and came back? That makes you a hero? I don't think I'm a hero, Wahlberg replied calmly. But I am honest about who I am and where I came from. Can you say the same? Can you honestly tell these viewers that you earned this job through skill, not because of your football past? The question hung in the air like a gauntlet. Strahan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. The confident, attacking demeanor that had dominated the interview was gone, replaced by a man thoroughly exposed. That's what I thought, Wahlberg said quietly, his voice now tinged with disappointed finality. You want to attack people's character? Dig into their past mistakes and throw them on live television? Maybe you should take a long look in the mirror first. This interview is over, Strahan said suddenly, his voice shaky, uncertain for the first time since the cameras started rolling. Is it? Wahlberg raised an eyebrow. Because I thought you wanted this conversation. I thought you wanted to ask the tough questions and hold people accountable. What happened to all that journalistic integrity you bragged about?" Strahan looked desperately at his production team. Everyone froze, unsure how to handle the collapse of what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview. "You know the real difference between us, Michael?" Wahlberg continued, voice heavy with triumph. "When I made mistakes, I faced them head-on. I went to jail. I made apologies. I spent my life trying to be better. When you make mistakes, you deflect and attack others to feel better about yourself." "I haven't made any mistakes," Strahan said weakly. But even he didn't sound convinced. "Haven't you?" Wahlberg asked, a sad smile forming. "Because this entire interview feels like a pretty big mistake. You had a chance to have a normal conversation with a guest who came in good faith to promote his work. Instead, you turned it into a personal attack because you thought it would make you look tough, important, or like a real journalist. How's that working out for you?" Strahan said nothing. His face was a mask of defeat, the confident morning show host replaced by someone exposed under the studio lights. "I came here to talk about my movie," Wahlberg said, straightening his jacket with deliberate calm. "I came here to connect with your audience, and maybe tell a few stories that would entertain people. Instead, you ambushed me with personal attacks and tried to humiliate me on live television. Well, congratulations, Michael. You got your confrontation. I hope it was worth it." With that, Wahlberg turned and walked off the set, leaving Strahan standing alone behind his desk. Speechless, utterly defeated. The cameras rolled, capturing every moment of the host's humiliation as he struggled to find words that would never come. The studio fell into a deafening silence, broken only by the hum of equipment and the echo of Wahlberg's footsteps as he exited. What began as a routine morning show interview had become a masterclass in how not to treat a guest, and the entire television audience had witnessed every uncomfortable second. If you enjoyed this breakdown of one of the most shocking moments in morning television history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. What do you think really motivated Michael Strahan to attack Mark Wahlberg so aggressively on live TV?